This has got to be one of the more unfortunate things that's happened recently in the gaming industry. Space Marine 2 is one of the most hyped upcoming titles of, well, 2024, and it has been leaked online in full. I cannot imagine how devastating this must be for the development team, because having your years of hard work be completely taken out of context, not entirely finished, and put online for free must be a kick to the guts. The game is set to release in September of 2024, with it evolving everything upon the 2011 classic, the third-person shooter that takes you on the campaign of Titus and his fellow Ultramarines. God, it looks goddamn incredible, using the same techniques that Saber Interactive used on games like World War Z to create these tyrannid swarms of thousands of units on the screen at one point. Having execution moves, having plethora of weapons, arms and armors, all very lore accurate to Space Marines, and not only that, but having a really cool multiplayer looking game mode and co-op within the campaign. So it is not a surprise that people are waiting for this, and people are incredibly excited. But the entirety of it is now here. The whole game, 75 gigabytes, has been leaked online, from the story mode to its multiplayer, 2 months ahead of this official release. And yeah, it's a bit of a disaster. They actually said it will be almost a year old, this version of the game, by launch. It's the last August version of Space Marine 2, but that's pretty much the game in its entirety, which tells you a lot about how far in advance this thing was finished. This is a huge project, so they have been working on marketing and a few tweaks in the last year, but really it's all well and finished, hence the 75 gigabytes. So far, there have been reports of the leaked version, looking unfinished. Menus and tutorials are filled with placeholder assets, and within the game, it looks like there are a few assets that aren't there. But other than that, well, it's kind of smooth. The gameplay is in its mostly finished state, and you get a good idea of exactly, well, how the game is supposed to work. Fortunately, I haven't played it, and I'm actually trying to avoid any spoilers for this game because I am very excited about it, and I genuinely feel if there's a game that you are really looking forward to, try and avoid most of it until it's actually ready and the developers actually can give it to you in the form that it was always intended. If we're paying money for it, we want to see it in its best possible light. Surely. The game went gold last week. If anyone doesn't know, that means it is ready for shipping. So the leaked version is not that. Once again, it's speculated it was August's build or even February of last year as well, so we're pushing it back quite far. Yet from the gameplay that we have seen and that has been officially released, I can say with confidence that the people behind it, Saber Interactive and Focus Home Entertainment, are doing a good job of sticking to be faithful to the original, since it's built up such a loyal fan base and is held in such high regard because of its incredible mechanics, being one of the only third-person hack and slash Warhammer 40k games, of course the fantastic voice acting by Mark Strong, and the storyline that you follow with interesting outcomes towards the end without any spoilers, and I'm looking forward to see how that is actually developed within the sequel. But Focus Home Interactive have released a statement. They have come out and spoken exactly about what they think about this leak. We are deeply touched by the overwhelming support we've received from our community following the leak of an old build of our upcoming game. And that's something they keep trying to reiterate, because this is not the only thing I've heard about this leak build. In fact, so many people that unfortunately have played it, and it is admittedly piracy, have said that it is somewhat unfinished. So it's kind of obvious why they keep telling people it's unfinished, not to judge it by that leaked version. Our teams have poured years of hard work, passion, and dedication into creating a game worthy of your hopes and expectations, and it's disheartening that many of the surprises we worked to keep a secret were spoiled. Now, I really am trying to stay away from this because I know the story is having a complete overhaul. This is something that we're following the same character from before. So if you haven't played the first Space Marine, it is actually kind of expensive on Steam at the moment, but I think it will be a worthy successor. But one thing they did say back in its early development, that you don't need to know the story of the first game. In fact, mostly it's going to be adjacent and have little Easter eggs and things that go within it, rather than being a complete linked-in MCU, Space Marine Cinematic Universe. You know what I'm talking about. We are saddened that this build, which will be almost a year old by the time we launch, see how they put that in again, is how some of our most eager fans will experience Space Marine 2. They don't want people to judge it based on this version of the game. Our unwavering commitment has been to deliver the best possible game for our players, and this was the driving force behind our decision to spend more time on development to ensure we deliver the best experience we can. This is really addressing, well, how the development cycle of Space Marine has come along. Since it's been in the works for so long, I'd probably expect 4 or 5 years at this point. But because the budget is so much bigger than the first, because it's got the backing, and of course we're bringing in huge actors to play the roles, not only that, but using those massive swarm mechanics we saw in World War Z, you can tell they are not skimping on any part of this. Then we have to go into the behind the scenes of all the lore as well to try and keep that historically accurate. They even released a behind the scenes and development update on their YouTube channel with all the people that were the screenwriters, the researchers, and everybody coding and art directions, telling people how much they adored the lore and how much they were trying to stay as accurate as possible. And I can see how disheartening it is that this has happened at this point in time, so close to its final release. They finish off their statement saying, "We're asking everybody to avoid this unfinished build and to not spoil the game for those excited to experience it for the first time at launch. Space Marine 2 will release on September 9th, and the best way to support our team's hard work is to play the game as they always intended." And that's their final part of the statement. I think it's very vague, doesn't really tell all that much, and if I'm going to be honest, I think it's mostly just filled with disappointment. The game isn't even that far away, and already people are bringing out parts that they don't know. There's always footage that's being released online now, and spoilers for story, the gameplay, and just generally the way that this development has gone has been so positive, and the hype that is built around it has been something that I really wanted to see. It is always terrifying when a sequel to a beloved game is made by a different studio and brought into the limelight over a decade later. But it is the first time that I've seen it done so well and brought such positivity into this community that I guess at the last hurdle, they didn't just fall on their face, they splattered into the mud, rubbed it around a bit, and got several infections. Hopefully this is not going to affect the game so much. I really think that the game will still get the sales it does. I mean, copyright laws doesn't really come into fruition here because whilst you can say it's piracy, there's not much you can do at this point. Game files will be copied, it will be everywhere, and people will be playing it. So I personally would say please avoid this at all costs. If you want great games and great sequels, endorsing this kind of thing is how we get our rubbish live action DRM filled games that Ubisoft and EA are pumping out year after year. Because smaller companies, and even though they're fairly big in the grand scheme of things, but smaller indie titles and more niche genres of games get swamped. Especially for things like this. Events that happen that cause them to have less faith and lose money mean that we get less games like this. And Space Marine 2 is a game that I want. In fact, I think it's a game that I need to inject into my veins, and I will be here on September the 9th just to do such a thing.